Arizona has a very specific way of selling freedom. It shows you a desert sunset, a dirt road, 20 acres for less than the price of a used pickup truck, and then waits until after you fall in love to mention the water situation. Because yes, Arizona still has cheap land. Apache County has listed land around $1,464 per acre. Navajo County is around $1,902 per acre. Cochise County still has undeveloped land listings around $1,974 per acre. And Mohave County has off-grid listings where the median price is about $15,999. Those are the numbers that make normal people start saying dangerous things like, honestly, we could just do solar, which is usually the first sentence in a very expensive documentary about hauling water. Because the cheap land is real, that is the problem. It is real enough to make smart people stop asking boring questions. The silence is real. The sky is real. The fantasy is also real, at least for the first 30 minutes after you find the listing. But the part where you buy 5 acres, park an RV, drill a well, build a cabin, and become a desert philosopher by Thursday, that part has paperwork and probably a septic permit, because Arizona is not empty. It only looks empty from far away. Up close, it has county zoning, well rules, septic rules, floodplain maps, roads that may or may not legally deserve the word road, and aquifers that have been quietly screaming for decades. So before another land listing convinces someone that a dirt road is a retirement plan, let's look at the Arizona counties where off-grid land still looks cheap, and what the listings usually leave out. Not the fantasy version, the real version. The counties where prices are still low, land is still available, and the fine print is sitting in the desert wearing sunglasses. Start with Apache County, the cheapest looking trap. If Arizona had a bargain bin, Apache County would be near the front of it, probably under a handwritten sign that says 20 acres, no utilities, bring personality. This is northeastern Arizona, big sky, high desert, long dirt roads, and listings that still make people stop scrolling. According to land.com, Apache County has a median listed land price around $1,464 per acre, with a median listing price around $59,900. LandSearch shows off-grid listings there with a median price around $21,999. Compared to most of America, where buying land now feels like bidding on a museum artifact, that is still reachable. You see parcels near Concho, St. John's, Sanders, and those wide, high desert stretches where the roads get rough, the neighbors disappear, and the GPS starts acting like it needs emotional support. For the right person, this looks like heaven. For the wrong person, it is an unpaid internship in dust management. Apache is attractive for one very simple reason. It still looks possible. Not easy, possible. And possible is exactly how the desert gets people. Because Apache County teaches the first real lesson of cheap Arizona land. Cheap does not mean rule-free. Apache County says temporary use of land may be possible if you are not creating an environmental health hazard. That sounds relaxed, almost friendly. Then the county quietly adds the part people forget to screenshot. Septic systems, compost toilets, and privies still require permits as on-site wastewater treatment facilities. So yes, the county may not immediately panic because you have an RV sitting somewhere remote. But if your wastewater plan is the desert will understand, congratulations, you have misunderstood the desert. The desert does not understand. The county does not understand. And your neighbors, even 3 miles away, will understand too much. That is Apache in one sentence. The land can still be cheap enough to feel like a loophole, but the minute your dream produces wastewater, the loophole gets a clipboard. And that does not mean Apache is bad. It means Apache is honest, if you know where to look. The price is low because the land is remote. The parcels are big because the infrastructure is thin. The silence is beautiful. because there may be nothing nearby to rescue you from your own planning. So Apache belongs near the top of this list. A median land price around $1,464 per acre is rare now. But before you start naming your future cabin, check the boring things: access, water, zoning, parcel history, septic rules, and whether the road becomes soup after rain. Because affordable is not the same as effortless. That mistake has sold a lot of desert land. Next is Navajo County, the quiet one with rules that are very much awake. Navajo County has the same basic spell as Apache: open land, low prices, big sky, and listings that whisper, "You could leave everything behind," which is a very persuasive thing for dirt to whisper. Land.com shows Navajo County around $1,902 per acre, with a median listing price around $65,000. Land Search shows off-grid listings with a median price around $24,900. Still cheap enough to make people do math they probably should not be doing while emotionally tired. Navajo County includes Holbrook, Snowflake, Winslow, Joseph City, Haber-Overgaard, and rural land, where near town depends entirely on your tolerance for gravel. Some areas are flat and dry. Some are higher elevation. Some have trees. Some feel like a place where you could build a cabin, install solar, and finally stop pretending apartment living is emotionally sustainable. But Navajo County gives the second Arizona lesson. A zoning ordinance is not asleep just because the land looks empty. The county has an official zoning ordinance. It includes rules about recreational vehicle placement. And it updated guest house zoning standards in September 2025. That date matters because it tells you the rules are not fossilized. They are active. They change. The county is not just a scenic background for your off-grid montage. This is where people get into trouble. They see cheap land, no power poles, no neighbors, no obvious sign of civilization except one very suspicious mailbox. And they assume that because the landscape looks unregulated, the land use must be unregulated too. That is not how this works. Arizona counties can be rural, quiet, and still very aware of what you are doing with an RV. Especially if that RV slowly becomes a temporary home with a porch, a shed, a water tank, and the confidence of a permanent address. And that is why Navajo is interesting. It is not the cheapest county. It is not the wildest county. It is not the obvious internet darling, but it is exactly the kind of place that can trick you because it feels calm. Apache looks like a bargain. Navajo looks like a harmless decision. That may be worse, because harmless decisions are the ones people make quickly. Navajo County has real off-grid appeal. It has cheap rural land. It has variety. It has places that still feel overlooked. But it is not a place to buy blind and hope nobody notices. Hope is not a land use strategy. It is barely a strategy for keeping houseplants alive. If you are looking there, check the zoning. Check RV rules. Check whether temporary living is actually allowed. Check whether the parcel has legal access, not just a line on a map that looks emotionally convincing. And check the water before the sunset starts making decisions for you. Because Navajo County may still be affordable, but it is not a blank patch of land where rules go to retire. For the most interesting legal setup, though, you go south to Cochise County. Cochise is the county that makes off-grid people lean forward in their chairs, because Cochise County has one of Arizona's most unusual rural building setups, the Owner-Builder Amendment. The county describes it as a way for property owners in unincorporated rural areas to build with reduced permitting costs and fewer building safety inspections. That sentence alone has probably launched 1,000 browser tabs. Fewer inspections, reduced permitting costs, rural land. You can practically hear someone opening Zillow with trembling hands. But this is Cochise County, not a motivational poster. There is fine print. The property must be in a zoning district with a maximum density of 1 dwelling per 4 acres or larger. The owner-builder remains responsible for code compliance, and zoning, floodplain, septic, well, and other approvals still apply, which is county language for. You may have escaped one hallway of bureaucracy, but the building has several floors. There are 2 paths. Option 1 includes plan review and limited inspections, and may qualify for a conditioned certificate of occupancy. Option 2 has no construction plan review and no building safety inspections, but it does not qualify for a certificate of occupancy. That is the part people need to hear slowly. No plan review, no building safety inspections, but also no certificate of occupancy. Freedom, but with a receipt that says final sale. That is why Cochise is so tempting. Roughly 90% of its unincorporated areas are zoned rural. RU4 means a minimum lot size of 4 acres. Land.com shows Cochise County around $2,361 per acre. For undeveloped land, the median is around $1,974 per acre, with a median listing price around $72,000. So, Cochise is not the absolute cheapest, but it may be the most interesting, because it is not just cheap dirt. It is cheap-ish dirt with a legal pathway off-grid buyers actually care about. And that is where the trap gets more elegant, because Cochise feels like a loophole, but it is not a loophole. It is a doorway. And behind the doorway is still water. The Wilcox Groundwater Basin sits in Graham and Cochise counties. On October 23, 2024, the Arizona Department of Water Resources started proceedings to designate it as an active management area. A public hearing happened on November 22nd, and on December 19, 2024, ADWR issued the designation order. The reason was groundwater declines, land subsidence, and fissuring. Land subsidence is one of those phrases that sounds technical until you realize it means the ground itself is giving up. The designation does not mean every off-grid homeowner suddenly cannot live there. Water law is allergic to simplicity, but it does mean the region has entered a more serious groundwater management phase. And that matters because so many off-grid dreams depend on one sentence: we'll just drill a well. In Arizona, that sentence should be handled carefully, possibly with gloves. A DWR defines an exempt well as a well with pump capacity of no more than 35 gallons per minute, usually for domestic use. But even exempt wells require the proper notice of intent process, and drilling must be done by a licensed well drilling contractor. A DWR approval also does not override local restrictions. Another small sentence that ruins many large fantasies. So Cochise is not no rules. It is not build whatever you want. It is not government-free land, which is one of those phrases that sounds exciting until you remember roads, water, sanitation, fire safety, and gravity are still involved. Cochise is freedom with homework, and honestly, that may be the most Arizona thing possible. Next is Mohave County. Mohave is less of a hidden gem and more of a giant desert warehouse of listings. It stretches across northwestern Arizona, around Kingman, Golden Valley, Dolan Springs, Meadview, and the Colorado River region. Mountains, desert, scrubland, views that look expensive, parcels that sometimes are not. Land.com shows Mohave County around $2,812 per acre, with a median listing price around $99,000 and more than 4,600 properties listed. Land Search shows around 506 off-grid properties, with a median off-grid listing price around $15,999. That number explains why Mohave keeps showing up in searches. There is volume here. A lot of people looking for cheap Arizona land eventually end up staring at Mohave County, wondering whether a parcel outside Kingman could be the beginning of a simpler life. And sometimes, maybe, Mohave has sun, space, and enough listings to make a person believe the desert is personally inviting them. But Mojave's danger is different. Apache is the cheap trap. Navajo is the quiet county with active rules. Cochise is the legal, almost loophole. Mohave is the logistics nightmare wearing a discount sticker. Because the question in Mohave is not only, can I buy it? The question is, what exactly did I just buy? Can you reach it? Can you live there? Can you bring water? Can you handle the road? Can an emergency vehicle find you? Can your RV legally stay there longer than your optimism? Mohave County has a direct answer to the classic question. Can I just live in a travel trailer? In certain zones, temporary travel trailer residents may be allowed, but you need permits. Specifically, a septic permit and a temporary travel trailer permit, renewable annually. That is not park and vanish. That is park, apply, renew, and please do not improvise wastewater. Mohave County also says an approved septic system is required for all projects with plumbing. Its septic and well process includes site investigations, applications, installation review, inspections, and construction authorization. And construction cannot begin until authorization is signed. So again, the desert looks empty. The rules are not. Mohave can still be practical, especially for someone willing to research deeply, compare parcels, stay near a town like Kingman, and avoid the most isolated mistakes. But cheap listings here should be treated like desert wildlife. Interesting from a distance. Do not grab one just because it looks harmless, because in Mohave, the price may be low. But the logistics can get expensive very quickly. Solar is infrastructure. Water hauling is infrastructure. A well is infrastructure. A septic system is infrastructure. A road you can actually use after rain is infrastructure. A driveway that does not turn into a philosophical problem every monsoon season is infrastructure. If you skip all that, you are not living off-grid. You are camping with property taxes. And then there is La Paz County. La Paz is not here because it is the cheapest. Let's be clear about that. If this video were only about the lowest price per acre, La Paz would not be the star. Land.com shows La Paz County around $4,166 per acre, with a median listing price around $180,000. Land Search shows only 11 off-grid listings, with a median price around $40,000. So no, La Paz is not the bargain bin county in this story. La Paz is here because it shows what happens when the cheap land dream meets Arizona's water future. It is the warning chapter, the part of the story where the sunset is still beautiful, but the aquifer has entered the chat. In January 2026, ADWR designated the Renegras Plain Groundwater Basin as Arizona's 8th active management area. The basin spans parts of La Paz and Yuma counties. A DWR Director Tom Bushatsky issued the order on January 9, 2026, after proceedings began on October 27, 2025, and a public hearing was held on December 18th. A DWR said groundwater withdrawals in the basin have outpaced natural recharge by roughly 900%. That is not maybe take shorter showers. That is the aquifer equivalent of spending 9 times your salary and acting surprised when the bank calls. A DWR also said one well showed a water level decline of more than 240 feet since the 1980s. 240 feet. That is not a fluctuation. That is a biography. Bushatsky said the future of residents and businesses depends on protecting the finite groundwater resources in the Renegras Plain Basin. That quote says, "The quiet part, plainly, Groundwater is finite. Desert land is not just land. It is land sitting above a water question. And that is why La Paz belongs here. Not because it is the cheapest, because it is the preview. A lot of people buy rural desert parcels as if water is a side detail. Something to solve later. Something the listing forgot to mention because it was busy saying panoramic views. But in Arizona, water is not a side detail. Water is the plot. If you cannot get it, store it, haul it, protect it, or legally use it, then the land does not care how cheap it was. You bought a view, a very dry view. And that is the real story behind Arizona's last cheap off-grid counties. They are not disappearing only because everyone is finding them. They are getting harder because the easy assumptions are disappearing. The assumption that every rural parcel can become a homestead. The assumption that no neighbors means no rules. The assumption that drilling a well is just a line item. The assumption that an RV can sit there forever because technically nobody is around. The assumption that off-grid means outside the system. It does not. Off-grid usually means you become the system. You become the power company, the water department, the road maintenance crew, the sanitation department, and if you do it badly, the actual government comes back into the story, usually at the least cinematic moment possible. So, which Arizona county is best? That depends on what you are really buying. Apache is the cheapest looking entry point, but the wastewater rules are waiting. Navajo is quiet and varied, but the zoning is active. Cochise has the most tempting owner-builder setup, but water deserves serious attention. Mohave has volume and low off-grid listing prices, but it can turn into a logistics nightmare fast. And La Paz is the warning county, not the cheapest, the clearest. Because the cheapest land is not always the best land. Sometimes it is cheap because it's remote. Sometimes because access is rough. Sometimes because water is complicated. Sometimes because the parcel is beautiful in the way a locked door is beautiful. And sometimes because the seller hopes you fall in love with the sunset before you ask boring questions. Ask the boring questions. Where does the water come from? Is the road legal? Can you live in an RV while building? What does the county require for septic? Is the parcel in a floodplain? Can a well be drilled? How deep are nearby wells? Is hauling water realistic? Or is that just something people say before they own a trailer? Because Arizona will absolutely sell you silence. It will sell you stars. It will sell you space. It will sell you the feeling that modern life has finally stopped breathing down your neck. And on the right parcel, with the right planning, that can be real. But Arizona will not do the math for you. It will not pave the road. It will not refill the aquifer. And it will not make a bad parcel good just because the price looks like a typo. That is the uncomfortable beauty of these last cheap counties. They still exist. Apache, Navajo, Cochise, Mohave, and La Paz standing there at the edge of the story like a warning label nobody wants to read. Not perfect, not easy, not the fantasy version from the listing description, but real. And maybe that is why they are still worth looking at, because the dream is not dead. It just has a septic application now.